The stars burned cold and silent, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Before them stretched the Empire's fleet, thousands of warships, bristling with firepower enough to erase worlds. To the rest of the galaxy, this armada was invincible. To humanity, it was a death sentence delivered with laughter. The Empire mocked us as primitives, fragile and foolish for daring to dream of the stars. They expected us to beg. They expected us to kneel. But then, a shadow stirred in the void, a shape older than rumor, sharper than fear. It was not supposed to exist. Not to them. Not to anyone. The human warship slid from the dark like a phantom, black hull swallowing starlight, weapons glowing with the fury of a species too stubborn to die. The Empire's laughter broke into silence, into disbelief. For the first time in millennia, their armada trembled. And the question that froze across every channel was simple, brutal, and human. What happens when prey finally bares its teeth? Captain Elias Rourke had never wanted glory. On Earth, before the wars, before the evacuation fleets and the desperate colonization efforts, he'd been just a boy from a coastal town where the sea air carried the scent of salt and rusted ships. His father repaired fishing boats. His mother taught school children who would never dream of leaving the shoreline. Elias remembered the weight of gulls circling above the docks, the quiet dignity of his father's scarred hands, and the long evenings when the ocean horizon seemed to whisper of something greater. When the Empire came, those whispers turned to screams. They didn't come with banners or mercy. They came with fleets, armadas vast enough to blot out skies, to scorch colonies, to make entire nations kneel without a single shot fired. They laughed at humanity's crude weapons, at our fractured governments, at our stumbling first steps into the stars. Humanity was a curiosity to them, nothing more than a minor annoyance to be swept aside when convenient. Elias had been 20 when he enlisted, not because he believed Earth could win, but because he couldn't stomach the thought of surrender. The first years were brutal. Ships lost, worlds abandoned, friends buried in silence among the stars. Humanity fought like cornered wolves, snapping and bleeding against a predator that thought the kill already assured. It should have ended there. By all logic, by every tactical projection, it should have ended. But humans had a way of turning last stands into beginnings. That was how Elias found himself aboard the Resolute, a warship that was never supposed to exist. It had been built in secret, in the shadow of Earth's dying embers, forged from desperation and stolen fragments of alien technology. Rumors called it cursed, unstoppable, a phantom lurking in the void. But to those who served aboard her, she was home, steel and fire and the last testament of a people who refused extinction. Elias stood often at the bridge viewport, watching the stars slide past like distant fires. To his crew, he was a steady hand, a captain who never raised his voice but carried the weight of every life aboard. To himself, he was still that boy on the docks, staring at horizons he could never quite touch. The reports had been coming in for weeks. The Empire was moving again, gathering ships in numbers too great to ignore. Whispers from shattered colonies spoke of a final push, a demonstration of power meant to extinguish humanity's last sparks of defiance. Some said they were coming for Earth's ruins, to grind them into dust as a warning. Others claimed they sought the scattered human colonies, to end the exodus once and for all. What Elias knew was simple. Humanity's time was running out. On the bridge of the Resolute, his second officer, Lieutenant Caravay, handed him a datapad. Her face was pale, her voice clipped. Confirmed. The Empire has deployed the Aurelius Line. Thousands of warships. They're sweeping this sector. Elias's hand tightened around the pad. The Aurelius Line was legend among soldiers, an unstoppable wall of fire and steel, the Empire's favorite instrument for crushing rebellions. Entire species had vanished under its guns. Most would have despaired. Some would have surrendered. But Elias Rourke only gazed at the tactical map and thought of gulls circling over a quiet ocean, of his father's hands repairing broken hulls. He thought of the people who still clung to scattered colonies, waiting for a miracle. And he thought of the Resolute, her engines humming like a heartbeat, her crew waiting for his word. "This is it," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "They think we'll kneel. They think we'll scatter. But they've forgotten one thing." Lieutenant Vey tilted her head. "And what's that, sir?" "That prey doesn't run forever." Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold. Somewhere in that endless dark, the Empire's armada was closing in, confident, arrogant, ready to snuff out the last trace of human defiance. But they hadn't yet seen the Resolute, and when they did, the galaxy would remember what humanity looked like when cornered. The alarms began 2 days before contact. The Resolute prowled the black between stars, her crew whispering like a family caught between dread and anticipation. Every sensor sweep confirmed it. The Empire's Aurelius line was advancing, a tide of warships blotting out constellations. The tactical holomap bloomed with crimson icons, each one a fortress of steel and plasma cannons. Elias Rourke stood at the center of the bridge, one hand braced on the command rail. His officers worked in tense silence. Every breath felt measured, borrowed. "Estimate?" Elias asked. Lieutenant Vey's fingers danced across the console. 2,000 warships minimum, heavily shielded. Their formation is tightening into a wedge. Target. "Direct course toward Kepler's refuge," she answered, her voice taut. The name hit like a blade. Kepler's refuge wasn't a fortress or outpost. It was a colony, one of the few havens left where humanity's exiles had built lives among the stars. Families, children, farmers who still tilled alien soil, hoping their crops would take root. The Empire had chosen it carefully. Crush the colony, and the rest of humanity's scattered survivors would break in despair. Elias felt the silence stretch. Every pair of eyes on the bridge turned toward him. He could see the question burning unspoken. What can one ship do against thousands? He answered it with a single order. "Plot and intercept." Gasps rippled through the crew. Vey's mouth parted, then tightened. "Sir, one ship," Elias cut in, his voice steady, "that they don't believe exists." The Resolute moved like a predator through the dark, her engines whispering, her hull swallowing the starlight. She wasn't the largest ship humanity had built, far from it. But she was something else, an anomaly, a miracle forged from desperation and brilliance. Human engineers had taken scraps of alien tech scavenged from battlefields, welded them into designs no sane admiral would authorize, and birthed a vessel that defied every law the Empire took for granted. Her stealth systems bent light until she seemed like a shadow in motion. Her rail cannons could punch holes through battleships. Her experimental drive gave her bursts of speed that made her seem like a phantom flickering in and out of existence. And at her heart was something no Empire ship possessed, a human crew that refused to kneel. Elias walked the corridors the night before contact. He passed engineers whispering to machines, pilots running flight drills in silence, gunners tracing prayers along the barrels of their cannons. They were young, most of them, but their eyes burned with something older than fear. Hope. Rage. The quiet determination of a species tired of being underestimated. In the mess hall, someone had scrawled a message across the wall in chalk. For Earth, for the lost, for the living. Elias traced the words with his gaze, then left them untouched. The day of battle began with silence. The Aurelius line emerged from fold space like a wall of fire and steel. Thousands of ships, their hulls gleaming with imperial banners, their engines burning like false suns. The formation was flawless. rows upon rows of cruisers, dreadnoughts, and carriers advancing as one. From the bridge of the Resolute, Elias watched them spread across the stars. His crew whispered curses, prayers, fragments of songs. The Empire's admiralty broadcast across all channels, their voice dripping arrogance. Humanity, your colonies are forfeit. Lay down your arms, and your extinction will be merciful. No one on the Resolute answered. Instead, Elias gave his first command. Engage cloak. Take us into their shadow. The Resolute slipped into the gaps of the Empire's formation like a ghost. Alarms flared briefly on enemy ships, sensors flickering, officers squinting at anomalies. But no one believed a human vessel could penetrate their lines. They dismissed the blips, the whispers of something unseen. That was their first mistake. Inside the Empire's fleet, Elias studied the map. Red icons pressed toward Kepler's refuge, oblivious to the predator in their midst. His voice was calm, steady. Helm, bring us alongside their supply carriers. The Resolute drifted between titanic cruisers, so close their hulls seemed to scrape the edges of her cloak. The crew held their breath. One error, one flicker, and they'd be vaporized. Elias didn't hesitate. Target their fuel lines. Fire when ready. The first rail slug tore through a carrier's belly. The explosion rippled outward, a chain of fire that consumed two neighboring ships before alarms even screamed. The Resolute peeled away, cloak shimmering, vanishing before the Empire understood what had happened. On 1,000 bridges, panic bloomed. Sabotage! Anomaly detected! Unknown weapon signatures! Where is the attacker? But there was nothing on their sensors, only shadows. Strike after strike followed. The Resolute darted through the fleet, cutting fuel lines, crippling engines, gutting carriers. Her rail cannons sang in silence, each shot blooming into firestorms that sent wreckage spinning through the void. The Empire's precision faltered. Formations wavered. Captains barked contradictory orders, demanding answers their instruments couldn't give. And across it all, Elias's voice was quiet, almost detached, guiding his crew like a conductor of some grim symphony. Helm 30 degrees, gunnery ventral line now. Brace another explosion, another flare of light in the abyss. Each strike bought time. Each strike forced the Empire to slow, to glance over their shoulders, to wonder what phantom stalked them. But it wasn't enough. For every ship destroyed, 100 more pressed onward. The Resolute could bleed them, could sow terror, but she couldn't stop an armada. Not alone. Elias knew this. He had always known. And yet he pressed forward, deeper into the heart of the enemy, each decision heavier than the last. On the third day, the Resolute was cornered. A trap sprung, perhaps by chance, perhaps by instinct. 3 dreadnoughts closed in, their shields overlapping, their guns painting the dark with deadly fire. The bridge shuddered as energy beams lanced past, one grazing the outer hull. Panels sparked, crew staggered. Lieutenant Vey's voice cracked. "We can't slip past. Their formation's too tight." Elias's mind raced. Options flickered, each one darker than the last. Then his gaze landed on the anomaly drive, humming in its chamber like a caged storm. The drive had never been tested at full capacity. The engineers warned it could tear the ship apart, fling them into a star, or worse. But hesitation meant death. "Prepare the drive," Elias said. The crew froze. "Sir." "You heard me." Silence. Then, one by one, hands moved, switches flipped, systems armed. The dreadnoughts loomed closer, weapons locking. The Resolute trembled under their aim. "On my mark," Elias whispered. The countdown in his head ticked slow, thunderous. 3. The dreadnoughts fired. 2. Light blazed across the viewport. 1. "Mark!" The Resolute vanished. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then she reappeared, inside the dreadnought formation. The anomaly drive had hurled them in a blink, tearing space like paper. The dreadnoughts never had a chance. The Resolute's cannons fired point blank, shredding through armor, igniting cores. 3 Titans died screaming into the void, their destruction a shockwave that rippled through the fleet. On the bridge, breathless laughter and sobs broke free. Someone whispered, "We're alive. We're alive." Elias said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the tactical map, where thousands of red icons still burned. The Resolute had struck a blow, yes, but now the fleet knew they were real, and the Empire was no longer laughing. Across the enemy's command flagship, chaos reigned. Admirals shouted, demanding answers. Who had built this phantom? How had humans created such a weapon? Orders were screamed: hunt it down, corner it, annihilate it at all costs. For the first time in centuries, the Empire felt hunted. The Resolute fled deeper into the enemy formation, cloak flickering, hull scarred. Repairs were underway, but time was short. The anomaly drive was unstable. The crew was exhausted. And yet, Elias saw something in their eyes, a fire, unbroken. They had faced the impossible and survived. They had made the Empire bleed. On the bridge, Vey leaned closer. Her voice was raw, but steady. "Sir, we can't keep this up forever." Elias nodded slowly. His jaw tightened. "No," he said. "We can't. But we can show them something they'll never forget." A pause stretched. The crew waited. Elias looked once more at the sea of red icons, at the wall of fire closing toward Kepler's refuge. His voice was low, almost reverent. "Set course for their flagship." The bridge fell silent. Eyes widened, hearts stilled, because everyone understood. This wasn't survival. This wasn't retreat. This was a strike at the heart of the Empire itself. The Resolute cut through the black like a blade. Her hull was cracked in places, scarred by plasma fire, patched with hurried welds. Crewmen moved like ghosts through smoke-filled corridors, sealing bulkheads, whispering prayers. The anomaly drive thrummed like a storm barely chained, its glow casting strange shadows across the engineering bay. Every soul aboard knew the truth. This next strike could be their last. And yet, not one faltered. On the bridge, Elias Rourke stood straight as the Empire's flagship filled the viewport. It was a leviathan of steel, a fortress the size of a continent. Spires of weaponry bristled from its hull, each one capable of leveling a world. To most eyes, it was a god. To Elias, it was just another predator that believed prey would never bite back. Lieutenant Vey whispered, "Sir, they're shields. Nothing we have can punch through for long." Elias's gaze never wavered. "Then we don't fight long." The first barrage came without warning. Beams of energy lanced toward them, faster than thought. The Resolute rolled hard, her cloak sputtering, her shields flaring. Half the bridge went dark for a moment, and alarms screamed across every deck. "Damage to decks 5 through 7, someone shouted. "Seal them," Elias ordered. The Resolute answered with her cannons. Rail slugs tore across the void, smashing into the flagship's shielding. Explosions flared, beautiful but impotent. The shield held. More beams raked across the Resolute. She shook like a dying animal, plating peeling from her sides. The crew looked to their captain. They needed more than orders now. They needed something else. Elias's voice was quiet, but it carried. "They think this is a battle. It isn't. This is a message." The anomaly drive was ready, barely. Engineers reported the core unstable, energy surging to dangerous levels. Firing it at full output could tear them apart, or tear the flagship open with them. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. And still, not one hand faltered. Elias pressed his palm to the console, his reflection staring back at him in the darkened glass. He thought of Earth's oceans, of his father's scarred hands, of children in colonies who deserved more than ashes. He looked up. Helm, take us in close. Right through their firing arc gasps, protests, fear. But the helmsman only nodded, jaw clenched, and the Resolute dove. The void erupted. Beams scythed across their hull, carving molten trails. Torpedoes streaked toward them, detonating so near the ship shuddered like it was tearing apart. Metal screamed, flames licked corridors, and through it all, the Resolute pressed forward, one broken phantom against a god. On enemy decks, officers shouted in disbelief. "They're charging us!" "That ship! What is that ship?" The flagship unleashed everything. The void became a storm of fire and fury, and still the Resolute came, her silhouette flickering, a nightmare they couldn't kill. Inside, the anomaly drive howled. Energy bled through conduits, burning systems alive. Engineers were thrown from consoles as sparks rained. Warnings flooded the bridge. "We won't hold, sir." "We don't need to," Elias said. His voice was steel. Vay's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she whispered the words carved in the mess hall wall. "For Earth. For the lost. For the living." The crew repeated it, voices breaking, uniting. The ship itself seemed to echo with the oath. Elias gave the final order. "All power to the drive. Aim us straight at their heart." The Resolute vanished. One instant she was there, a flickering, battered phantom in the storm. The next, she tore through space itself, hurling forward with impossible speed. The anomaly drive screamed, shredding physics, ripping through shields not meant to withstand such fury. The Resolute reappeared inside the flagship's defenses, too close for weapons, too deep for safety. Her cannons roared point blank, slugs punched into armor, torpedoes ignited magazines, the void filled with fire, and then the drive overloaded. The Resolute became light, blinding, searing, unstoppable light. The flagship split open, its spires collapsing inward, its core erupting like a dying sun. Thousands of enemy ships reeled in shock, their formation fracturing, their confidence shattering. The Empire's god of steel was gone. On the bridge, Elias felt weightless for a moment, as if suspended between heartbeat and silence. Around him, the crew stared at the viewport as the impossible unfolded. The Resolute was dying, systems failing, hull crumbling. But the flagship was burning. And in that burning, Elias saw something greater than survival. He saw the message carved into history. Humanity does not kneel. He drew a slow breath, steady despite the chaos. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Transmit everything," he said. "Let the galaxy see." The communications officer, hands trembling, obeyed. Across every frequency, every channel the Empire controlled, images of the battle spread. One human warship, broken but unbowed, tearing the heart from the enemy. The Empire's arrogance cracked in that instant. Fear replaced laughter. The Resolute shuddered one last time, her drive burning out, her systems collapsing into silence. Elias stood tall, eyes fixed on the flames consuming the flagship. He whispered, not as a captain, not as a soldier, but as a son of Earth. For Earth. For the lost. For the living. And with that, the Resolute vanished into the fire she had unleashed, leaving the galaxy forever changed. The battlefield drifted in silence. Once, the void had thundered with the fury of the Empire, plasma storms, rail cannons, energy beams lashing across the stars. Now, Wreckage floated like bones scattered across a cosmic grave. Twisted hulls turned slowly, their once proud banners dim and broken. The Empire's fleet, its symbol of eternal dominance, was gone. And at the heart of it all, the warship. Our warship. Its hull bore the scars of fire, plating scorched and jagged where enemy rounds had struck. Entire sections flickered with dying power, yet still it moved forward, steady and unyielding, like a beast refusing to fall. Humanity's ghost had survived, and with it, the spirit of a species that refused extinction. Across the galaxy, voices crackled on encrypted channels. First whispers, then roars. The impossible had happened. The Empire had lost, to humans. Planets long enslaved under imperial chains lit fires of rebellion. The unthinkable had become inevitable. If the Empire could bleed, it could be broken. And in the quiet after battle, Marcus stood on the bridge, watching stars stretch endless before him. He did not smile. He did not cheer. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of what humanity had unleashed. He thought of Earth, scarred but alive, of colonies that had whispered they might never see dawn again, of the names etched into the memorial walls, mothers, fathers, children who had paid the price for humanity's stubborn defiance. The warship had avenged them. But vengeance alone was not enough. "Transmit," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. A comms officer nodded, eyes wide, waiting. "To the galaxy," Marcus continued. "Let them hear it." Static gave way to words that would echo across systems, carried by trembling resistance fighters, by slaves on factory worlds, by exiles hidden in shadows. Greater than we are humanity. We are not extinct, and we will not kneel. The words rippled outward like fire through dry fields. Across a dozen star systems, the enslaved lifted their heads. Across 100 more, rulers stared at their screens in silence, dread curling in their chests. For the first time in ages, the Empire was not feared. Humanity was. The bridge crew fell into silence, staring at Marcus. Some had tears in their eyes. Others clenched fists in grim pride. No one spoke because there were no words strong enough for what they had just lived through. And somewhere in the stars beyond, imperial courtiers whispered in panic. Admirals scoured maps. Their emperor's palace, once untouchable, now trembled with the realization that shadows they had mocked now carried blades sharp enough to cut empires down. This was not the end. Battles yet waited. The Empire would strike back. Humanity would bleed again. But something fundamental had shifted. The myth of their invincibility was broken, and myths, once broken, never heal. On the bridge, Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time since the war began, he let himself feel hope. Fragile, dangerous, intoxicating hope. The warship moved on, scarred but unbroken, carrying its crew and the weight of a message no fleet could silence. And the galaxy itself seemed to whisper the words, as if carried on every star, every silence, every spark of rebellion waiting to ignite. The Empire laughed at humanity until they saw our warship.